Cats, what do you think of when you hear the term old school biker? No, no. Before we go any further, I don't consider myself an old school biker for a couple reasons, and I'll discuss that in a minute. But what do you think? What's the picture you get when somebody says he's an old school biker? I don't know, the picture that comes to mind with me is kind of a grizzled older fella. Usually has a lot of facial hair, long beard, maybe longer scraggly hair, leathery skin. You know, you can tell by looking at his face, the wrinkles, the lines, and the tan that he spent some time on the road. He's usually a guy that has some nice sleeve tattoos, or some real nice artwork on him he's collected over the years, and more than likely he's put a few miles on a motorcycle and he knows how to wrench on a motorcycle. That's kind of the image I get. Now, it seems to me that, and I know some of these guys that I would consider old school bikers. They tend to get an attitude, and especially against, the sport bike riders and things like that. Why is that? Why do they feel entitled? Well, that'll be part of the discussion today, too. Now, I'm not an expert at this. I'm just throwing this out there, just kind of giving my 2 cents worth on this. But most of the old school bikers that I know have given that to their lifestyle. Okay, they have adapted to the motorcycle culture 100%, and they've lived that life for quite most of their life. They've lived that. So they've got a lot of experience under their belt. They've got a lot of stories to tell, and they show the wear and tear for it. Now, if you've ever had any dabblings in the deep motorcycle culture, you'll know that some people kind of sell their soul to it, 101%. That I don't do. I never have. I'm a man of many colors. I like to ride. I put a lot of miles on the bike. I've been riding since I was a kid. And I have ridden back and forth from one side of the country to the other more than once, and have lots of stories related to motorcycles and that kind of thing. But I haven't really, there was a time in my life when I was more committed to the motorcycle culture, but that seemed to be a dead-end street for me. It wasn't working out too well. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stories that took me down the wrong road. So it was something I couldn't stick with. I had a full-time job, a good position, and a chance to better myself in that position. So that being said, I couldn't adapt to a full-time biker life. For one, facial hair was out. Now, that's the thing with the old school bikers. When you have a lot of facial hair, when you got a long beard, see, my employer wouldn't allow this. They said it has to be up above your bottom lip was their rule. And they had, I don't know what their reasoning was. I know in the shop a lot of times it's safety things. You either got to have it tied back with a net or something. And even if you have long hair, you have to keep it tied back so it won't get caught in machinery and stuff. Any other kind of a job, any other kind of a profession, usually they're looking for more of a clean-cut fella, so they're not likely to hire you, if you got long hair, long scraggly beard, and a lot of tattoos. That's the truth, okay? as angry as some people will be about it, that's the way our culture is. That's the way our culture is. A lot of employers want, clean-cut looking employees, and they don't tolerate anything else. So I had to kind of follow that mandate to, keep my job and to better my position in my career. And it worked. I was able to do very well and make some pretty good money with my job. I worked 40 hours a week. I had good benefits. I had vacation and sick pay, and it was just a whole package, and I couldn't let that go. It was too good of a deal. So for me to go full-time into the biker culture would have been a collision course with my career. I couldn't do that. So old school bikers are going to have a hard time finding, a mainstream career. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody, because I'm sure there's some that have some pretty good careers in life. And I'm not sure exactly what all those are, but some of them really have to struggle. So they end up taking a job, maybe, like a blue-collar job, a maintenance kind of a job, maybe a mechanic or a welder or something like that, because there really isn't a whole lot else out there to be found for people of that culture. If you get real deep into the motorcycle culture, and you're joining a club or something, the clubs have very strict rules too, and demands. And when they say ride, it's time to ride, and you give up everything to ride, including your job. So that doesn't work very well either. So why do these guys have attitudes? That's what I want to talk about. Why do they have attitudes? Most of them are going to be Harley riders, I think. Now, the culture of the motorcycle world is changing completely from what I grew up with, because it's broken off into so many subdivisions now. There's definitely a division with the sport bike riders, who have a whole different code, a whole different way they ride, and then you get the touring bike riders that have the big laid out machines that are just all, travel and touring all over the country and stuff. You've still got some of the old school Harley riders. You've got the weekend warriors that I call them, the rubs, the yuppies. It breaks off into so many tangents nowadays. It's pretty crazy. But the old school bikers, they have an attitude because they've grown up with Harleys. I'm going to stick with that right now, that a lot of them are Harley riders. And when you look back at the history of our country as far as motorcycling goes, the first motorcycle introduced to the USA was an Indian, and secondly came the Harley Davidson. And I may be wrong on that. There might have been a French bike or some weird, Royal Enfield or something that was the first bike over here. But I know the Indian and the Harley were the first major motorcycle companies in the U.S. So that's kind of like heritage, it goes back to the basics. And these guys grew up with that's number one, Harley Davidson is number one because it's USA. I know the argument's going to be, they make all their parts in Japan. Yeah, well, it was the first bike that was a major motorcycle company. It was the first major motorcycle company, major keyword, in the U.S. So there was a lot of Harleys being sold back during the World Wars, and the clubs were being started, and a lot of them were Harley Davidson clubs, and they had a lot of animosity towards anything else you brought in. Well, then they started coming in with all these cheap Jap bikes that started bringing into the market. So that made a little friction there. It's like, you guys don't ride with us. Don't ride that cheap Jap junk. We're Harley Davidson. So that's kind of, the old school attitude. And a lot, it used to be, there's a magazine, Easy Riders. It's still on the market, and way back when I was a kid, and I don't know if they still kind of tend to lean that way, but way back in the late 60s, early 70s, I'm not quite sure when that magazine was first published, they were very biased. And they were, kind of like pro Harley Davidson or the Indians, and they didn't want much to do with Jap bikes. I think that's kind of changed over the years because of the way the culture has morphed. But these guys that, they feel entitled because they ride their Harley. They feel entitled because they put a lot of miles on their bike. They feel entitled because they've lived a hard life. They probably sacrificed a lot to stay in that motorcycle culture as deep as they did. They may have sacrificed family. I know when you're riding all the time, it's hard to maintain family relationships, marital relationships and whatnot. Unless your spouse rides with you all the time, it means you're gone all the time. So it's not good for a relationship to be into that full-time motorcycle culture. And a lot of these guys are going to end up being single too. So they got an attitude. Yeah. Some of them aren't too pleasant to be around. You got to accept them for who they are. You got to give them a little bit of respect. They're usually good guys at down heart, deep in their heart, They'll usually give you the shirt off their back once you get to know them. And they're great guys to ride with. So I don't know. What comes to your mind when you think of old school biker? And no, not me, because I'm not old school. I gave up that culture a long time ago. I still ride, I still like to ride, but I don't ride with the clubs anymore. I don't ride with groups or tag-alongs or anything like that. So I've just kind of been more independent and just doing my own thing. And then I got a lot else going on. Retired now, some property. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. I got a lot of yard work, chainsaw work, lawn mowing. My father passed away, so I tend to take care of my mom a little bit too. A lot of responsibilities, taking care of my wife, who's been having some health issues. I've had some serious health issues myself, so when you tend to all of that stuff, you have to focus, and your focus goes away from the bike not so important anymore. That's kind of where I'm at. Nice chatting with you guys today, and remember, keep it up on two wheels, ride hard, die free.